Moncrief with Gas Networks Ireland. Aren't you tired of that ugly fuel storage tank? Having to order and write that big cheque for the delivery guy? gasnetworks.ie/move to gas.
It's more unusual here, but in the US, the vast majority of newborn male babies are circumcised. But there's enough thought being given as to why this is being done. Intact America is a group that maintains the procedure is in fact mutilation. On the line is Georgianne Shapin, founding executive director. Georgianne, good afternoon to you.
Hello, nice to speak with you, Sean.
When a male baby is born in an American hospital, is the question even asked of the parents, do you want the baby circumcised, or does it happen as routine?
The question is asked as routine. So it's almost asked as an assumption, more like, you want your baby circumcised, right? And many parents, unfortunately, haven't thought about it or haven't thought enough about it. And when a doctor suggests something like that and says it as though it's a foregone conclusion, many of them will say, well, I guess so, feeling like, well, if the doctor is suggesting it, it must be a good thing. But this is changing, and of course that's what Intact America's purpose is to change the way Americans think about circumcision.
But would it be fair to say, Georgianne, that it's become, in the last decades, it had become so routine that it got to the point where it was seen as a bit weird if you weren't circumcised?
Yes, that's right, and that is what we are working to combat at Intact America. And at this point, about half of babies are lucky enough to leave the hospitals with all their private parts intact. But yes, it was very, very common, and as a result, most American men, probably about 75% of adult men in the United States, I would say over the age of 30, are circumcised. So many, many American women, again, most, have never seen a normal penis. And this is changing again, and that is part of what Intact America is trying to do. We promote the message, the fact, that circumcision is not medically necessary, that it's painful and harmful, not just to the baby, but to the man he'll become, and that cutting a child's genitals, a boy, a girl, any child's genitals, violates that person's right to their whole body.
Now, in some instances, the circumcisions take place for religious reasons, and there can be rather grave issues connected with that as well, because as I understand it, sometimes it's done by people who aren't licensed to do this kind of thing. When it's not for a set of religious reasons, what's the medical rationale? Or is it a kind of a dull sense that, well, it's somehow cleaner?
Yeah, that's the kind of fallback. If all else fails, say it's cleaner, and then nobody's going to say, well, I want to have a dirty penis, so I'm not going to be circumcised. Of course, we know that's absurd, that if you can teach a child to brush his or her teeth or wash his or her hands, they can certainly wash their genitals. And most men don't find that to be an unpleasurable experience in the shower to make sure that their penises are kept clean. So it's all archaic. It goes back to the 19th century when American and British doctors started to promote circumcision because they thought it would keep boys from masturbating if they inflicted pain on boys' genitals. Didn't work to keep them from masturbating, and it maimed, many generations of men in the English-speaking countries other than the U.S. It started to fall out of favor in the mid-20th century. None of the Commonwealth countries governments pay for infant circumcision. And in the U.S., insurance companies and our state Medicaid programs, which is for low-income people, but that covers about half babies born in the United States, for the most part, still pay for infant circumcision, which is a travesty, of course, to pay for an unnecessary mutilation of baby boys. Do
any of the major American medical bodies in the U.S. Promote circumcision or encourage people to get their children circumcised?
It's really crazy. I mean, the American Academy of Pediatrics says it's not, the benefits outweigh the risks, and then in the next sentence they say the complications have never been systematically studied. And then they say, although the benefits outweigh the risks, the benefits are not enough to justify circumcising every baby. So, okay, which babies then would be circumcised? It's changing. They are really on the run. One of the experts that was on their committee that came out with that silly report has subsequently come out and said that the main reason that Americans circumcise their babies is so-called cultural, which just means, it's a custom, it's a trend, it was a fad. Now it's falling out of favor, and they will. And actually, the same physician told me that our job at Intact America is to make the foreskin popular again. And I don't think I could have said it better myself.
There are claims, though, that it might be a factor in contributing to dampening the spread of HIV among heterosexual people.
It's crazy, again. The studies that is based on were conducted in very high prevalence areas in sub-Saharan Africa and could never, ever have been conducted in your country or in ours because they were unethically designed, terrible follow-up. We know that circumcision doesn't prevent HIV. If it did, American cemeteries wouldn't be full of circumcised men who died from AIDS. Is another absurd claim. Circumcision has absurd claims justifying it going back, decades, and all of these are debunked. So that's not to mention that little babies are not at risk of getting sexually transmitted infections. So somebody at the age of consent, at the age of 18, decides they'd like to have a part of their penis removed because it might help them in some other way. That's their business as long as they're informed. But that is not a justification for cutting a beautiful, perfectly normal body part off a baby.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are, and I assume you're not saying, because it seems as if there are sometimes circumstances, not but mostly not when it's an infant. There may be circumstances where a circumcision is necessary, such as when the foreskin is too tight, for instance. Right,
and of course, in countries that are foreskin friendly, that appreciate the foreskin, other methods will be looked to solve that problem before you go cutting off somebody's nice, functional foreskin. So sure, just like, your appendix can go bad on you, or you can get a tumor in your eye, but or women can need to have a breast or two removed. I feel like I can't possibly compete with that story you gave a couple minutes ago about. But I'm not that interesting. But we have all kinds of body parts that are subsequently treated or removed if they become diseased. But you don't go removing people's toes because they might get an ingrown toenail. You just don't do that. So sure, things can go wrong with any part of the body, and you address those, but you don't just routinely remove body parts. You couldn't remove enough body parts. You couldn't remove enough of the penis. I mean, penile cancer can occur, and the only way to prevent penile cancer from occurring is to cut off the penis. So we're going to do that. It's really kind of crazy that we have this one, men have one penis, right, and one foreskin, and it serves a very important function in protecting the rest of the penis and in sex. And we go and we try to mess with it and cut it off, and cultures have been doing this over millennia, and we don't really know why.
Yeah, and apart from the notion of just doing that to a baby, which is upsetting in and of itself, for men who have been circumcised, is there, and it's difficult, I suppose, because they've nothing to compare it to, but does it kind of affect their sex life in terms of the sensitivity?
Yes, well, we believe that almost goes without saying, and it's a very difficult message to hear. If you lost a body part without your volition, you never agreed to it. But if you want to compare, for example, if you lost a fingernail and it didn't grow back, the nail bed would initially be very, very, very sensitive. And then over time, it would become calloused. It would be exposed to air and to, washing dishes or whatever you're doing, and it becomes calloused. And that happens with a circumcised penis. And the interesting thing is that doctors, Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher, knew this in the 12th century when he said circumcision would keep boys to their studies and keep women from enjoying sex so much if their partners were circumcised. And the Victorians knew it too. They knew that cutting off the foreskin would make sex and masturbation less pleasurable. And now, of course, American doctors certainly deny that. because it's kind of a terrible thing to have to acknowledge. But you can't cut off a sensitive body part and retain the sensitivity of that body part. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy sex. It doesn't mean you can't father children, unless, of course, you've lost more of your penis in a botch. But sure, if you remove your fingertips, your fingers are going to be less sensitive because all those nerves and blood vessels are now gone.
It's interesting the reactions are coming in. Peter, who in Athlone, says, I slept with a few American women on my J1. A J1 is a student visa that a lot of students take. The reason that the reaction that they all had to my penis was very disheartening. One made me shower first. They were disgusted that I was wearing a turtleneck.
You should have walked out the door. Instead of walking into the shower, you should have walked out the door.
Sex is sex. They all thought it looked weird. It took the wind out of my sails more than once, I don't mind telling you. But a lot of people are saying, I'm circumcised and it didn't do me any harm, kind of thing.
Right. Well,
so I suppose a lot of them don't remember it happening.
Yeah, we know that on some deep psychological level, boys do remember it. Infant experiences, especially painful ones, are imprinted. But of course, there would be no conscious memory for most people. And if a man feels that happy with his body, we don't want to make men feel unhappy with their body. But our point is that once the circumcision once a boy's circumcised, it cannot be reversed. You can't get your foreskin back. So why do this to a baby, right? Let the baby grow up, become a man, and decide that he wants to take the risk or pursue the benefit if he thinks there's a benefit. But the vast majority of men who are not, I mean, sure, Peter would say that he didn't like the way American girls viewed his penis, and he's right.
But it does speak to the cultural thing.
Circumcised.
John, who's an American living in Dublin, says, my wife is Irish, I'm an American. We have very differing views on circumcision. She's due our first baby, a boy, next month. I really want to get him circumcised, so we will be like me and continue the practice. She doesn't, and it's causing massive arguments in the house. She started to get her family involved.
I hope she sticks to her guns.
Yeah,
I really do, because that's a very egocentric thing for a man to say, look like me. Will he give his son back if his son has a different color eyes? And who knows what his penis looks like and what his son's penis is going to look like? Leave the baby alone. Let the baby make his own decision. That's a very that's a really sad attitude. A lot of people have that. A lot of American men have that attitude also. But it's changing. It's changing a lot. And we have parents who've spoken out, both mothers and fathers. And in fact, we have our website is intactamerica.org, and we have fairly recently mothers and fathers who have spoken out and said they wish they had not gone with that kind of cultural pressure and circumcised their sons. They're very regretful. And recently a father told me, I made it all about me. I wasn't thinking about my son's well-being, and I will never forgive myself. So I hope that...
for you, is it, and for your campaign, is it literally a matter of changing one hospital at a time, or are you hoping perhaps states will legislate against it?
No, we want to change people's attitudes. We want to change, we want to make the foreskin normal again. And it's happening. We want people to not feel as the sex partner of that man who wrote to you that it's dirty. I mean, how can a body part be inherently dirty? We want to make having a foreskin okay and popular and fine and have people understand it. I think that legislation is a very remote possibility. There's a lot of opposition to that, primarily from the Jewish lobby and the religious lobby, even though only fewer than 1% of all circumcisions that take place in the United States are carried out as a religious ritual. That's a big misconception a lot of Americans have. It's really just a medical custom, and one that will go away. I mean, it will change, and it is changing.
Actually, on that,
and as soon as people realize that doctors make money off of it and hospitals make money off of it, and it's not to the benefit of their child, they are stopping.
M in Cork says, I used to work in a taxi bike company. I brought a Jewish lad to a circumcision to his home. I melted when I heard the baby scream. is just wrong on all levels. Phil says it's illegal in Ireland anyway, to dock the tails of puppies, which is to click their tails, but you can dock the penis of a baby. The world has gone mad. Right? Georgianne, thank you very much for speaking with us today. That's Georgianne Shapin there, founding executive director of Intact America.
Moncrief with Gas Networks Ireland. Aren't you tired of that ugly fuel storage tank? Having to order and write that big cheque for the delivery guy? Gasnetworks.ie/move to gas.